The Dragon Empress sat in her chamber, silent and still, as if the world had stopped moving. The golden light of the twin suns outside the palace windows did not touch her eyes. Her claws rested on the carved stone throne, but she did not see it. Her mind was full of emptiness, a hole no one could fill. The loss of her only child, her heir, had left a pain so deep that even centuries of experience could not soothe it. The dragons around her avoided the chamber. Servants, nobles, and advisors who once moved boldly in her presence now whispered in fear outside the doors, unsure of how to approach her. Any attempt at consolation was met with cold fire or silence that chilled the soul. The palace, normally alive with activity, had fallen into a strange, eerie calm. Corridors were empty. Machines that kept the orbital structure running hummed quietly, almost in sympathy with the sorrow inside. The dragon guards, usually proud and alert, stood stiffly in corners, unsure if they should act or simply wait. Every corner, every hall seemed to echo the absence of the young dragon prince. Portraits of past rulers and heirs lined the walls, their painted eyes staring silently at the grieving empress. She had ruled with wisdom and courage, and her subjects revered her, but now even her own subjects felt powerless. Below the great halls, where maintenance crews and workers quietly kept the palace alive, a human janitor went about his work. His hands were steady and his eyes focused, though he sensed the heaviness above. He did not see dragons often, let alone one in such sorrow. He was small, unnoticed, and that was exactly why he could move without fear. While other humans had been assigned to the palace for important tasks, they usually stayed clear of the upper chambers. They knew better than to draw attention. The janitor, however, moved silently through the empty corridors, polishing metal railings and sweeping dust from the floors, unaware that his simple presence might one day become important. In the highest chamber, the Empress closed her eyes. Memories of her child filled her mind, soft scales under her fingertips, the little roar that always made her laugh, and the bright, eager eyes that had once looked up at her with trust. The chamber felt empty now, cold and distant. Even the sunbeams seemed to avoid her. She could feel the entire palace responding to her grief. Doors that normally opened with ease resisted. Lights flickered. Machines hummed unevenly. The empire itself seemed to pause in mourning, as if the walls, floors, and ceilings understood her pain. Down below, the janitor heard the faint echo of movement above. At first, he thought it was just the machinery, the normal sounds of an orbital palace adjusting to temperature and pressure. But then he realized it was more, a rhythm, slow and heavy, almost like a heartbeat filled with sorrow. He paused, broom in hand, and listened. Curiosity pulled him forward. Without thinking, he started up the corridors that led toward the upper chambers. Each step made him more aware of the silence, the strange emptiness that pressed on him. He had cleaned palaces before, but never one with such stillness, never one that seemed to carry the weight of loss in every metal panel and stone wall. The closer he got to the chamber, the warmer the air became, though not in the usual sense. It was a weight, a presence that pressed against his chest. He imagined the power it must take to rule a vast empire and how fragile even the mightiest could feel when touched by grief. He imagined the Empress, alone and mourning, expecting no one to come, yet here he was, drawn forward by something he could not explain. He had no authority, no rank, and certainly no magic. But he could feel the emptiness and wanted to do something, even if it was only to witness it quietly. The chamber doors, massive and engraved with symbols of dragon lineage, loomed before him. He stopped a few meters away, unsure if he should enter. He felt the weight of centuries of power behind them, yet also the fragility of a soul broken by loss. He inhaled slowly and took a step forward. Nothing happened. He took another step, and then another, until he was close enough to see the golden scales glinting faintly in the light. The Empress did not move. She did not notice him. He realized she had been waiting for nothing and no one. She had expected the universe itself to leave her alone. He did not speak. He did not bow. He just stood, quietly observing, letting his presence fill the space without disturbing it. For a long moment, the Empress continued to stare at nothing, unaware of the human watching her from the threshold. The silence stretched, filled with unspoken grief, but it no longer felt entirely empty. The human's calm, patient presence seemed to seep into the room. It did not try to fix anything, it did not demand attention, it simply existed. For the first time in what felt like centuries, the Empress's shoulders relaxed just slightly. Not enough to break the sorrow, not enough to lift the weight entirely, but enough to notice that someone, even a small, quiet human, could stand near her without fear. Somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark of curiosity flickered, a feeling long buried. Maybe the world was not entirely cruel. Maybe someone could simply be near without demanding obedience or power. Maybe, just maybe, she could allow herself to feel a little less alone. The janitor stood there, still silent, still unnoticed, but somehow in his quiet presence, the first threads of hope had begun to weave through the palace of morning. The human janitor moved quietly through the palace corridors, his steps soft against the metal floors. He carried a small toolkit and a mop, nothing more. No one paid him any attention. Nobles, soldiers, and advisors were all busy with duties they thought important. He was not important. That was what made him invisible, and invisibility had its advantages. He could go where others feared, touch what others avoided, and see what others could not. The janitor did not think of himself as brave or clever. He simply did his work. Yet that work would soon lead him closer to something no one else dared to approach. The halls above were heavy with silence. The Dragon Empress's grief hung like a shadow over every corridor, touching walls, floors, and ceilings. Machines whirred slower, lights dimmed, and even the air seemed denser. Everyone who usually served her avoided the upper chambers, saying the Empress's sorrow was contagious, a power no one could handle. Servants whispered that even a look could turn them cold. Guards walked the halls with heads low, hoping not to be noticed. The palace itself seemed to hold its breath. The janitor reached a small maintenance passage that led close to the Empress's chamber. The entrance was narrow and often overlooked. He had been sent to clean it, to clear dust from forgotten corners, and to check that the small machinery there was working. As he stepped inside, the world changed. The air was warmer, heavier, almost like a living thing. Tiny vibrations traveled through the walls, soft, deep, and almost rhythmic. He realized it was the Empress's presence, felt even through the stone and metal. He paused, standing still, unsure if he should go further. But curiosity pressed him forward, a quiet pull stronger than fear. He worked slowly, polishing panels and adjusting small vents, aware of the strange atmosphere. Every few minutes, he would glance up the passage toward the main chamber. He imagined what it must be like to rule an empire, to feel so powerful and yet so helpless at the same time. His thoughts wandered to the dragons above, their golden eyes and long scales, their voices that could echo across space. He had never spoken to one closely. Humans rarely did. Most humans were too afraid or too small to matter. But here he was, in the shadow of the greatest dragon alive, feeling something he could not name. A sudden creak from the chamber above made him stop. He froze, holding his breath. The sound was not mechanical. It was alive, soft but deliberate, almost a sigh. The janitor knew instinctively that the Empress was near. Most humans would have run, but he did not. He had no reason to fight or flee. He was not important. That lack of importance gave him a strange freedom. He could be present without threatening her, without demanding attention, without trying to fix what no one could fix. He placed his mop carefully against the wall and stepped closer. The light changed as he moved, reflecting off the polished metal. Dust motes danced in the warm glow, and he noticed the small details of the chamber. A crack in the floor, a loose panel, a tiny vent that hummed softly. He adjusted them quietly, doing his work, but aware that he was close to something far larger than himself. The Dragon Empress was still above, unseen, yet her sorrow seemed to press down, almost like gravity. The janitor felt the weight but did not panic. He simply continued. After some time he heard a faint voice, not loud, but a low vibration that shook the floor slightly. It was the Empress, speaking to no one, murmuring words that only she could understand. He could not make out the language, but he felt the emotion, loss, anger, despair, and a longing for what was gone. Other humans would have fled. Many would have run screaming or hid in fear. But he stayed. He understood that his role was not to fight or argue or even speak. His job, as small and unimportant as it seemed, was to exist in that space, to show that not all humans were afraid, not all humans demanded obedience or power. He straightened a small panel, adjusted a sensor, and then stepped back. Nothing dramatic happened. No one thanked him, no one noticed. But he felt something shift, a subtle change in the air, a slight easing of the pressure that had hung so heavily. He realized without knowing why that his presence alone mattered. He was not a hero, not a warrior, not a noble. He was a janitor, small and quiet, yet somehow his smallness made him safe. He could be close to the Empress without provoking fear, without anger, without rejection. Hours passed in this way. He cleaned, repaired, and observed. He noticed the smallest details, the way the floor reflected light, the faint vibrations of the walls, the subtle warmth of the air where her presence was strongest. He realized that being unnoticed was a gift. He could exist alongside her grief without challenging it. He did not try to fix the sorrow. He did not speak to it. He simply was there, a steady human presence in a world that had forgotten gentleness. At the end of his shift, he paused near the entrance of the chamber, looking up at the closed doors. He did not know what would happen next. He did not know if she would ever acknowledge him. But he felt a quiet hope, a whisper that maybe someone, even someone small and unimportant, could matter in a place ruled by grief. For the first time he sensed that the Empress's sorrow, though immense, was not entirely alone. A single human, quiet and unnoticed, could exist nearby, and that existence was enough to begin a change. The janitor left the passage slowly, leaving the doors closed, leaving the Empress unaware of his presence. Yet in that quiet, simple act, something had begun, something unseen but powerful. A connection, fragile and small, had taken root between a grieving ruler and a human who was not important, and it was the beginning of a story no one else could have told. The janitor returned to the chamber the next day, carrying only his simple tools. He did not knock. He did not announce himself. He did not want to draw attention. Most humans would have trembled at the thought of standing near the Dragon Empress, but he had learned that silence was stronger than words, and presence stronger than power. The doors, enormous and heavy, stood closed before him. He paused, hand resting lightly on the cool metal. From within came a low, uneven sound, almost a hum of sorrow. The Empress was still grieving, still unreachable to anyone else, still lost in the depth of her own despair. He stepped forward carefully. His boots made almost no sound on the polished floor. Dust motes floated in the faint light from the chamber above, dancing slowly as if in time with the Empress's quiet, grieving heartbeat. The janitor did not speak. He did not bow. He simply moved closer, letting his calmness fill the space without demanding attention. Every movement was careful, small, and deliberate. He did not want to startle her. He did not want to provoke anger or fear. He only wanted to exist, to be a quiet presence in the vast emptiness of her loss. Inside, the Empress lay curled on her throne, her golden scales dulled by grief. Her eyes were open but distant, staring at nothing. The loss of her child had hollowed her spirit, and the weight of ruling an empire while feeling so empty had become unbearable. She had driven away all who came near with fire and fury, or with the coldness of her silence. No noble, priest, or soldier had been able to reach her. They feared her, and she had learned to expect only fear. The janitor paused a few meters from her throne, keeping his distance, yet close enough to be noticed if she chose to look. He knelt slowly, not as a gesture of submission, but as a sign of his quiet respect. He did not speak immediately. He waited, letting the room grow still around him. The Empress shifted slightly but did not rise. She felt him, though she could not see him well. She felt his calm presence, and something unfamiliar stirred in her chest. A spark of curiosity, a flicker of something like relief. Finally the janitor spoke, his voice soft and steady. "I do not know what to say," he admitted. "I cannot bring back what you have lost. I cannot take away your sorrow. I only know that you are not alone." His words were simple, ordinary, almost foolish compared to the grandeur of the palace and the power of the Empress, yet they carried a weight that no speechmaker, no priest, no ruler could match. They were not commands, not pleas, not advice. They were just human words, honest and unassuming. The Empress tilted her head slightly, listening, though she did not respond. She did not speak. She did not roar. She did not even move fully. But the janitor's words did something no one else had done. They reached her mind without breaking her walls. They did not challenge her grief. They did not pretend it was gone. They did not demand that she feel better. They merely acknowledged it and offered quiet companionship. "I cannot fix what is broken," the janitor continued. "I cannot make things right. But I can be here. If you wish, I will be here." His words were not loud or commanding. They were not meant to impress or intimidate. They were small, honest, human, and steady. He stayed kneeling, his gaze lowered, showing that he did not threaten her. He did not try to earn her gratitude. He only wanted her to know that someone, even a small human, could exist near her pain without being afraid. The Empress's golden eyes, dulled by grief, slowly focused on him. She studied him in silence. His hands were empty. His face was calm. He did not try to dominate her, did not try to frighten her, and did not make demands. For the first time in weeks, perhaps months, she did not feel the need to push someone away. She felt only the faintest curiosity, a fragile spark of something that could grow. Time passed in quiet companionship. The janitor said little, and the Empress remained mostly still, but the atmosphere in the chamber began to shift. The heavy air seemed lighter, the shadows less oppressive. The palace itself, which had felt so burdened by her grief, began to hum softly, as if relieved that a small, simple human had entered the room without fear or expectation. He did not force change, he did not demand joy or command her to act. He only existed, and that existence had power greater than any sword, spell, or royal decree. Eventually, the janitor stood slowly, careful not to startle her. "I will leave you now," he said softly. "But I will return. If you wish, I will always be here." He backed toward the doors, leaving a calmness in the space that had not been there before. The Empress did not speak, but she did not roar either. She watched him go, feeling something that was not anger, not fear, not despair. She felt the smallest hint of trust, a quiet recognition that even a single human could offer what no dragon or ruler could: simple, honest presence. The janitor left the chamber without fanfare. He returned to his work in the lower corridors, polishing floors, repairing small machines and emptying waste bins, exactly as he always had. To anyone else, he remained unimportant, invisible, and ordinary. Yet something had changed. He had crossed the barrier that no noble, priest, or guard could, reaching the Dragon Empress not with power or commands, but with words that held no power at all, words that were honest, human, and gentle. For the first time since her loss, the Empress felt that perhaps someone could be near without being destroyed by her grief. Perhaps someone could witness sorrow and remain unafraid. And perhaps, she thought silently, a small human janitor could teach a ruler and an empire something far more valuable than fear or power. Days passed, and the janitor continued his quiet visits. Each time he carried nothing more than the tools and cleaning supplies he always used. He did not announce himself. He did not demand attention. He simply entered the corridors and passages that led toward the Empress's chamber, moving carefully, deliberately, and respectfully. The palace staff watched from afar, surprised that anyone could approach the Empress without fear or warning. The human's presence became a quiet, subtle ripple in a world accustomed to awe, respect, and terror. The Empress noticed him more clearly now. She no longer turned away automatically, and she no longer let anger rise immediately when she sensed another life nearby. She observed him silently, fascinated. This small human moved without arrogance, without pretense. He did not speak grand words. He did not bow excessively. He did not try to impress her with his knowledge or skills. He only existed with quiet steadiness, a gentle rhythm to his presence that felt unfamiliar and strangely comforting. One day she finally spoke, her voice low and uncertain, a sound more like a question than a command. "Why do you come?" she asked. Her golden eyes, heavy with grief, studied him carefully. She expected some excuse, some attempt to flatter, perhaps even a lie. She was ready to reject him. But the janitor only looked back calmly, hands folded over his mop handle. "I come because I can," he said simply. "No one else can. I am small, unimportant, and quiet. I can be near without fear or demands. I can sit here and do nothing if you wish. I can just be." His words were plain. There was no eloquence, no ceremony, no grandeur. Yet they carried an unusual weight, the honesty of someone who did not seek reward or approval. The Empress tilted her head, considering him. She had seen many humans before, some brave, some foolish, some cunning. None had stayed near her in her grief without fear, none had offered simple companionship without expecting something in return. The janitor's quiet presence revealed something the Empress had forgotten: that kindness could exist without power, that patience could be stronger than fire, and that even small actions could ripple outward in ways she had never imagined. As days turned into weeks, the janitor's visits became a pattern. He cleaned, polished, and repaired small things near her chamber, never rushing, never drawing attention. He spoke only when necessary and then with gentle honesty. "I cannot change what is gone," he said one day, "but I can help you remember that life continues. Even in sorrow there is a place to breathe." The Empress listened. She did not reply, yet the tension in the room eased slightly. The air, once heavy and oppressive, became warmer, lighter. The palace itself seemed to notice the change. Machines hummed with steadier energy. Lights glimmered more brightly. Even the guards and servants felt less burdened as they moved through the halls. The Empress began to understand, slowly, that kindness did not require grand gestures. It did not demand obedience. It did not need wealth or rank. It simply required presence, honesty, and a willingness to witness someone's pain without turning away. The janitor's small, consistent actions revealed this to her more than any advisor or council meeting could. She saw that the human's quiet service was not weakness but strength, that his patience was not passivity but courage. One evening she spoke more than she had in months. "You are strange," she said, her voice softer than usual. "You do not fear me. You do not flee. You do not try to command or impress. You simply are. Why?" The janitor looked up from the floor where he had been repairing a small vent. His expression was calm, almost gentle. "Because I can," he replied again. "Because someone must be here. Someone small, quiet, honest. I do not seek reward. I do not seek glory. I only wish to help in the way I can." The Empress thought about his words. She thought about the emptiness she had carried, the walls she had built around herself, the fear she had inspired in everyone who approached. And for the first time she realized that strength was not always shown through fire or command. True strength could be revealed through patience, presence, and simple acts of kindness. The human's courage lay not in fighting but in staying. His power lay not in control but in quiet support. From that moment the Empress allowed the janitor to remain closer. She did not call him into her chamber fully, nor did she ask for his attention constantly, but she noticed when he was near. She felt the calmness that followed him, the gentle rhythm that contrasted so sharply with her storm of grief. She began to let herself trust in small ways that not all who approached her would cause harm. The human janitor had revealed something essential to her, that empathy could be stronger than fear, and that small, quiet acts could carry more weight than armies or fleets. The palace itself seemed to respond to this revelation. Hallways that once felt oppressive and heavy became spaces of gentle energy. Machines ran more smoothly. Guards and staff moved with steadier steps. Even the Empress's own body, once tense and rigid with sorrow, felt lighter in the presence of one small human who had no title, no power, and no grand purpose beyond simple kindness. In the weeks that followed, the Empress began to open in other ways. She started speaking softly to the janitor, asking small questions about life, about humans, about the world beyond the palace. She listened to his answers, finding wisdom in his simplicity, comfort in his honesty. And each time she felt her grief ease just a little, not gone but more bearable, more human, more possible to face. By the time the sun rose across the orbital palace one morning, the Empress realized something profound. The galaxy had many wonders, but the quiet courage of one human janitor, offering kindness without expectation, was among the most powerful. And that revelation changed not only her but the way she would rule, the way her empire would move, and the way she would see the universe itself. The Dragon Empress moved slowly through her chambers, her golden scales catching the soft light of the twin suns. She no longer walked with the weight of endless sorrow pressing every step. The janitor had been coming for weeks now, quiet, steady, unassuming, and always present. She had learned to notice him without fear, to allow his calm presence to touch her grief without breaking it. For the first time since her loss she felt something almost foreign, a sense of trust. The janitor arrived as he always did, carrying only his small tools. He did not bow or speak loudly. He did not announce himself or demand attention. He simply entered, moving through the corridors as though he belonged, which in a strange way he now did. He paused at the threshold of her chamber, glancing briefly at her before kneeling to begin his small maintenance work. The Empress watched, not interrupting, not commanding, simply observing. "You have been patient," she said softly, her voice almost trembling. "No one else could stay. No one else could see me without fear." She did not shout, she did not roar, she only spoke quietly, as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace she had begun to feel. The janitor looked up at her calmly, his expression gentle. "I do not fear you," he said. "I am here because I can be. I do not seek reward or recognition. I only wish to be near you, quietly, honestly, without harming you." His words were simple, but they carried more weight than any declaration of loyalty or oath from an entire army. The Empress considered this. In all her years of ruling she had commanded armies, struck down enemies, and ruled with wisdom and fire. Yet here, in the quiet presence of a single human, she felt a strength she had never known. It was not the strength of claws, wings, or magic. It was a quiet, unassuming courage, a courage born of empathy, patience, and honesty. She realized then that true power was not always shown through destruction or dominance. Sometimes it came from kindness. Days passed and the bond between them grew. The Empress began to speak more, asking questions about the human world, about his life, about things she had never cared to understand. He answered patiently, never boasting, never demanding, never stepping beyond the quiet respect he had always shown. She listened. She learned. And slowly she began to smile again, small and fleeting at first, but genuine. Word of the Empress's slow recovery spread through the palace. Guards, staff, and even visiting dignitaries noticed the change in her demeanor. The palace, which had once felt heavy with grief, now carried an air of calm and hope. Machines ran smoothly, corridors echoed with quiet energy, and the tension that had gripped the empire for weeks began to fade. People whispered not only of the Empress's healing but of the strange, quiet human who had helped her, not through words of command, not through strength or rank, but through steady presence and honesty. The Empress reflected on what she had learned. She had seen empires rise and fall, had dealt with betrayal, conquest, and war. Yet she had never understood that the simplest actions, being present, listening, showing compassion, could carry more weight than fleets of ships or armies of dragons. The janitor had revealed something fundamental, that even the smallest, most unassuming life could change the course of history, if guided by kindness and courage. One evening she allowed him to sit closer, near her throne, without fear. They did not speak much that day. She simply observed him while he adjusted small panels and cleaned neglected corners. His calmness filled the room, like a gentle current that softened the jagged edges of her grief. She realized that the bond they shared was unique. It was not one of ruler and subject or dragon and human. It was a bond built from trust, respect, and shared silence. The Empress took a deep breath and felt a shift within herself. She looked at the janitor and said softly, "You have taught me something that no council, no army, and no ceremony could. You have shown me strength in kindness, patience in silence, and courage in humility." He looked up at her with a quiet smile, simple and honest. "I only did what I could," he said. "And you allowed me to be here. That is enough." In the weeks that followed, the Empress began to take small steps beyond her chamber. She spoke to advisors with a calmer voice, treated staff with gentleness, and listened more than she commanded. Her grief had not vanished, but it had transformed. It no longer ruled her life. Instead, it became a memory, a source of empathy, and a reminder of the human courage that had touched her heart. The janitor continued his quiet work, never seeking praise or recognition, yet his impact was felt across the palace and, ultimately, the empire. The Dragon Empress decided to honor this small human in a way that others would understand, not for the sake of glory but to show that kindness and courage mattered. She declared that humans in her palace and her empire would always be valued, not for strength or firepower, but for their honesty, patience, and compassion. Across the empire, the story of the small janitor who comforted a grieving empress spread quietly, inspiring dragons and humans alike. And the janitor returned to his work, quietly polishing floors, repairing machinery, and sweeping dust. He remained small, unnoticed, unimportant to anyone who had not felt the depth of the bond he shared with the Empress. Yet in his quiet way, he had changed the course of history, proving that even the simplest acts of kindness could ripple through an empire, softening hearts and opening minds. The Empress would never forget him. And in her chambers, once filled with sorrow and emptiness, there was now warmth, trust, and a new understanding of what it meant to lead with compassion. A bond had been forged, not of fire or fear but of quiet humanity, and it would be remembered in the stars for generations to come.